On this week's show, discussing Is It Construction's Got Milk Moment with Sebastien de Ghellinck from SkillSignal. In this week's news, are we expanding construction robotics? And more. All right, we're back. Everybody tuning in might see my old friend Rob McKinney back on the microphone. Rob, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing amazing, sir. It's been a long time. It's good to be here with both you guys today.
Yeah, it's a good time for it, my friend. I mean, I think you saw this one, sunk your teeth into, came up out of that hard working zone to have a little convo, huh?
Well, if you want to talk about safety on the crew, you kind of got to go with the OG sometimes, right? If I can put that name out there.
Hey, it was a trio when this thing started, my friend, and you were one of them. So that's it. Sebastien, good morning, my man.
Good morning, Jeff and Rob. How are you?
We are great. Hey, y'all, just so you know, this is a cool one for me. About a year ago, I covered an article / post that SkillSignal and the team over there and Sebastien covered on the Is This Construction's Got Milk moment. And he heard it and said, wait a minute, you can't cover my thing and get me on. Sometimes it takes a little while to get us on, but Sebastien's now on. We're going to have a cool conversation and we're ready to go. So Sebastien, give everybody a little bit of background to you, why you're here, what you're up to, and what's going on.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for having me on the podcast. It's an old dream of mine. I started the SkillSignal company with my co-founder Vivian about 5 years ago, just before COVID, actually. So that was an interesting story. Talking about timing, we started actually in November of 2019, and we went in. And by 6 months later, April of 2020, when we were at the worst of the pandemic, we didn't even know if we still had a company. But lo and behold, we're still here. SkillSignal has grown tremendously. We're very proud of what we've achieved. But I think Vivian and I, we come from the same stories. We come from construction. Both of our families are in construction. You can probably hear from the accent, even though I'm sitting in New Jersey and I've been in the United States for the last 15 years. I'm still working on my accent. My kids who are growing up here sometimes are really embarrassed because of me. But yeah, so I grew up in Belgium, tiny small country in Western Europe, and my family has been in real estate and construction over there. I'm going to give a shout out to my grandfather, actually, because I credit him for a lot of what's going on for me right now, in the sense that he was one of the directors of the national electricity company in Belgium, and he happened to be there after the Second World War. So Belgium was one of the countries that was really ravaged by the war. And when the war was over in 1945, everything needed to be rebuilt. The entire grid needed to be rebuilt. And my grandfather happened to be one of the people that was going to manage that entire, rebuild better. And one of the most vital, infrastructures that we all depend on. And he was a very soft-spoken. He's been, unfortunately, he passed for quite many years now, but he was a very soft-spoken. I have that memory of him, of being a very extremely kind person. And but what I learned afterwards is that he was the one responsible for introducing the first safety regulations inside the National Electricity Company. And what I heard from several people who used to work with him is that, as much as he was a kind person, he became fierce like a lion when it came to making sure that the guys that were working in the fields, the electricians that were rebuilding that entire network, were going to be safe and going back to their families at the end of the day. So he introduced the first kind of regulated PPE program in the company. He was working with the manufacturers because he couldn't find anything that was good enough for the guy. So he worked with the manufacturers directly to make the quality of those PPE better and according to his standards, which were very high. And I always remember when he passed, and we were at his funeral. There were a lot of company men at his funeral, and part of his eulogy was actually someone reading a list of the people that were saved because of what he did, the decisions he made. And so that was, I was 10 years old, 10, 11 years old. So I was boy, but I was so impressed by what happened during that day, and just finding out that your grandfather has been doing all of that work. He never talked about it. So for him, this was just, what he was doing. That was his mission. So again, I hope that I have that passion in my blood and, in what we're doing with SkillSignal today.
I think you do. And I'm interested now because you didn't take a direct path like, oh, I'm going to jump right into being a GC. I'm going to jump right into an electrician or running a company. You have a kind of surreptitious route. So tell me how you go from 10 years old, you see that. Now you go through your own career, you have some finance experience, et cetera, to get you to land over here back to, kind of something that's probably been just sitting in the back of your head the whole time.
Yeah, it was the part of me that needed adventure. Even though I grew up on construction sites, 10 years old, 12 years old, I got married, and my wife had the same ideas of wanting to travel the world, living different places. So I started my career after my studies, college studies. We very quickly, my wife and I, took the decision that let's give this a try. So I started working for financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, and anytime that they wanted someone to go abroad for a project, I was the one who was raising my hand. So my wife and I ended up living in. We went from Belgium to London, England, then to Istanbul, Turkey. Then we actually landed in the United States, in Cincinnati, Ohio, which has a very special place in my heart, Cincinnati, and then from there, New York City, where we lived quite a few years, and then finally New Jersey, beautiful green, nice New Jersey. I live just outside of Princeton, so central Jersey, about an hour away from the city and an hour away from Philadelphia. And in the meantime, talking about the family, we got 4 kids, my wife and I. So they were born here, so they're American citizens, and we're very proud of that. And so while I was making those, going through those adventures, I went into something at those companies, which was operations and systems building. That was every time that I was moving around, I was building systems, building operations and processes. So I did that for about 17 years, and then at some point, I guess the part of me, the construction part of me, just when came back, and I said, you know what, let me combine what I've learned throughout my career of building systems and processes, and let me combine that with the industry that I love above everything, which is construction. So today I'm kind of in a place where I find a lot of flow for myself, because I'm industry that I love, and I'm building the things that I think I have been able to build in the past, and kind of get that experience. And it's something that I love making. It's systems.
That's a fascinating background, Sebastien. First thing, let me tell you, don't be embarrassed of that accent. Lean into that and be proud of it, man. Jeff and I speak at a lot of places. Man, always hold on to that. That's roots. There's nothing to be ashamed about that. When your kids get older, they'll get it, man. Lean
Okay.
into that accent. People that don't know where you're from, just start making up states. In the US, you'll see that perplexing look of like, that he doesn't sound like he's from Nevada. What? Say you're from Florida. Who cares, right? But I can relate to you about the grandfather link. It's amazing hearing your story of your grandfather and the work that he did.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather served on Guadalcanal in World War II, so he was fighting over on that side while your grandfather's on the other side, right? Long story short, the reason I'm telling you that is I served in the U.S. Peace Corps 50-something years later on the same island. I went back to the same country. So he was in the Solomon Islands under war. I go back in the Peace Corps. Different time, but yeah, very interesting connection to be literally standing in some of the same ground that he was at, the airport that he worked on, looking at it, thinking, I wonder what it was like back in the day when they were bombing it, 24/7 and bullets were flying. It's kind of a weird, so surreal way to connect with our ancestors, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I deeply believe that there is, that blood that runs in our veins. There is so much that we need to give back to them because they kind of made it happen. So it's and then I think, as you said, it's then there the weird coincidences that the universe and God is giving us, and and there you are in the same place 50 years later, and or really passionate about the same things decades later. So it's fascinating.
And it is indeed. Let's talk about where you're at currently. I'm curious. So I've looked at a few safety apps over the years.
Mhm.
You've been working in this space for a few years. What are your thoughts on still trying to get construction companies to digitize workflows? And specifically, you're working on safety.
Mhm.
What has that been like in your conversion of, are companies taking to this very easy? Is it a push? When you talk to contractors about safety,
Mhm.
what's that look like for you right now?
I think that's a great question because that's exactly where we meet most of the prospective clients of SkillSignal. That's where we meet them. Is like, we are a company. We are, we're very concerned with our employees' safety and well-being. So we want to do the right thing, but we also recognize that it's taking a lot of time. We believe it's time that's not well spent because it's manual processes, it's paper and pen, so we don't get any value out of it except checking boxes. And so essentially, that's in 9 cases out of 10. That's exactly where we meet with the people that are talking to us. And I think when you're talking about digitizing construction in 2024, and especially the place that I know best, the process I know best, which is safety. When you go the digital route, there is basically two benefits that you're getting in one move. The first one is that you are creating efficiency. So at the end of the day, there is still a whole bunch of checklists that you need to do by the end of every day. That's just, it's regulation. You need to do it. It's part of the things that you need to do. You make that more efficient by making it digital, doing that form on a tablet or on a digital device is going to be much more efficient than paper and pen. But then the second benefit, which is something that we believe is even more powerful, is the fact that now you suddenly have data. You have data that's starting to emerge within your company, within your own operations, on your projects and job sites, within your crews, and you can start using that data. You can start looking at certain trends over time. And that's an enormous benefit to any company who switches to digital.
Jeff, it sounds like somebody sat through a few presentations at a ConTech roadshow.
Whenever you're talking about something as substantial as suicide awareness and as alarming as to statistics around construction being the second highest rates of suicide in industry, we'd be fooling ourselves if we thought that this was a one-player fix, meaning that it just takes one silver bullet or one easy button to solve this challenge. This is a multi-threaded challenge, if you will, and it's really something that is the responsibility of all of us to lean in, to raise awareness, to provide tools and resources, to up-level conversations we have around, in construction, we're pretty much, hey, what's my job require me to get it done at any cost? Well, we now see what the outcome of that is. So I think it's important that we partner together to really have a unified voice around why mental health awareness is important, why it matters, and how we can frankly do better as an industry. It takes each of us leaning in to really create that.
It does. It sounds a lot like that. But you guys you're interested in a little bit more, and in talking to you when you reached out after we covered your got milk moment, which I still want to get back to what that means to you, because I think that's a super cool idea. It plays along with a lot of what we've done here at the crew. But you've also kind of focused in more on well-being and health, and seeing some of the massive, look, we have the pause for the cause here. Cal Beyer was on the show recently talking about our substance misuse issues,
Mhm.
Our suicide rates. Those are all too high. And, you tap that on top of we work in a dangerous environment. There's no way to make this not dangerous in ways, right? What we're doing, lifting tilt up concrete, lifting panels, dealing with hot work, all those things are dangerous, right? We
Mhm.
can minimize and we can be smart, but in the end, it is dangerous work. So tell me a little bit about like how your focus has been on, your efficiencies, and you've got data, but what is that doing? Like, how can that help those problems?
It's the whole question, I believe, that when you look at safety, there is, the traditional way that people look at safety is we're going to try to keep you physically safe, right? We're going to try to make sure that you don't get hurt, that you don't get any cuts, that you don't fall. And that's a super important point, because that's the beginning of the road. Not getting people hurt on job sites. And to your point, like, you go to a job site, and not a lot of people outside of construction realize that. When you go to a construction job site, the difference with people that are in an office setting, the worst case that can happen to my physical integrity in an office space is that I fall from my seat, right? That's pretty much what can happen to me. And I've been, in office settings for 15 plus years. I never felt unsafe, physically unsafe. On a construction site, everything you look at, everything what people are doing can hurt them. The machines that they're using, the equipment they're using, the things that they're placing. If it falls, if something gets out of control, it is very quickly going to hurt them. So that's a very important part. But then we wanted to combine that with we call it well-being, because it goes a little further than safety. And it's really talking to our clients. More and more of our clients are actually getting they're really getting into not only safety, but also the total well-being of the employees and of the workers on job sites. Because you can be, working with a piece of equipment and lose control over it, or not being trained or anything like that, and now it's going to hurt you. But there is another factor, is that if you're under the influence, and it doesn't need to be drugs, it's, you you are you have pain in your body, because construction is extremely physical. So you took a painkiller in the morning, and it somehow, has an effect on your mind. And um and so if you're under the influence, if you are using that piece of equipment, and you're thinking about your, a family member who is, sick at home, or a child who is getting bullied at school or something like that, any moment of where you're not attentive of what's going on, it's going to result in the same injury, or, something happening to you. So the mental health of construction workers in general is so important. And again, I think Vivian and I, looking at our background specifically in construction, we wanted to recognize that this was something that was extremely important. And so we started going after, universities and colleges in the United States, to see if we could do some research. And we were very lucky that actually someone at Princeton University opened their doors to us. And so for about a year and a half, we worked with their Department of Behavioral Sciences, and Public Policy, to on a project that we called the construction well-being initiative. And we have a website. We've published all of our research there. It's called wellbeing.construction. And I'll repeat that a few times. And essentially, we went on a mission for a year and a half, talking to as many people as possible in the construction industry to find out how they were making their construction job sites better for the humans that are working on them.
That'll be interesting to really read from the academic side of things, because what I can tell you over the last several years, being out in the real world, talking directly to superintendents, to safety professionals, that stress level is at an all-time high. I've had safety professionals tell me they've had workers, here's one example. A safety person's walking the site, ask a trade, hey, I forgot your safety glasses. Can you put those on? And the person literally came off a ladder at him, threw a hard hat. It got to the point, he thought he was going to call 911 for either a sheriff for violence or a meltdown for an ambulance. It's on a job site about a pair of safety glasses. It was like 11 in the morning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's crazy the level of stress that we're seeing from the site. It's where Jeff, myself, several other people, we've really been looking at this for the last year. And I came across a guy a year ago that gave me a term. It's laying into what you're describing. He was saying, with all due respect, your industry is great at PPE. You spend millions of dollars a year and all this training and time and effort, and from steel toe boots to safety helmets, you're great. But with all due respect, you guys are not so good at is the mindset. And he gave me this term, PPM, personal protective mindset. That's what you were just getting into of what does the company do from that psychological safety standpoint, that it's okay to bring things up. Some of the research that I've been reading and listening to, when you get into it, it talks about silence, and silence is powerful. And silence is also really, from a safety side of things, what you were kind of getting at, it's one of the worst things you can have, because when you know better, when you know something's wrong, will you stay quiet to protect your own interests versus the crews or even seeing yourself? That's what I think you were starting to tap into, right? It's talking about from the mindset, what can we do to improve this industry so that workers don't get hurt themselves? Or to your point, somebody running a crane or a dozer, fill in the blank. You could be using equipment or a piece of materials. And what if you hurt somebody else because that momentary slip of the mind, that you lost focus just long enough, you didn't get hurt, but what if you hurt somebody else? I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly. And I think you said it exactly right. We are really at an all-time high when it comes to stress, people getting meltdowns, people really being crushed by the pressure. I think what your friend told you about the PPM, and I'm going to write that down, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's what's happening under the hard hat. And there is a hard hat, but what's happening under that hard hat, which is equally important than having that hard hat on your head. And so knowing that everything is at an all-time high, and nobody likes to talk about this, but and you guys have, and I give you a lot of credit for that, suicide rates. I mean, you talk about it every week, right? So suicide rates are at an all-time high. I know that there are some institutions that are bringing out new numbers for the last 2 or 3 years, but we know by now that it's been at an all-time high and it continues to go up. And what a tragedy! Right? It's the biggest tragedy of our industry. Looking at where we are right now, which is at again an all-time high of that psychological stress that a lot of people are experiencing on job sites. How can we go from here? And that's the got milk moment. The industry needs to change. The industry needs to realize that if it wants to attract the younger generation to start working in construction, then it needs to adapt. It needs to make some changes and start not only caring about the people, because I think people care. I mean, nobody's going to say, like, I don't care about my people. But again, the pressure is there. The pressure is there. And there is some very deeply ingrained processes and risk processes in particular in construction that are complicated and that are kind of pushing that pressure to the last level, which is the individual trade workers. But how do we make that? How can we change that? How can we, like the got milk advertisements, where you had those, those big time movie stars having those milk mustaches, if some people not aware of that. How can we make construction sexy again? How can we make that a great industry for people to consider when coming out of school? Because construction is great. It can do a lot of things for that. I know so many 25-year-olds in construction, they live debt free, and they will be homeowners, paid off, in just 2 or 3 years. They make good money. They have jobs that they're very passionate about, but it's the exception right now. So how can we make that better?
Yeah, you hit a number of things. It's where I love how all this kind of comes together, because you have your construction got milk moment. We look, NFL had the same type of problems, right? They had concussions, and they had, all of this traumatic brain disease. And they took a look at it and they said, okay, it's not like the NFL is less popular today than it was before, but they instituted new rules, new procedures, new things, right?
Gotcha.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, because the NFL has so many great things, right? It's fantastically fun and impactful. Well, not as much as building the stadium where they play, or building the water treatment plants that make clean water, or the power grids, or the semiconductor factories, the wonderful things that are built across this country, right? Construction has all of that. But yeah, do we have an underbelly? You're right. But actually, I'm with you, Sebastien. I've not walked up to very many people and had them say, like, well, I don't care about my people. We're not back 20 years ago when, we would burn through them, and it's like, I'll just get another one because there's somebody here to back you up. We know we're not at that point anymore, and we're not there as a society either. So I love this, because Rob, you take your PPM, personal protective mindset, and then Sebastien, you take a tool like SkillSignal, and you do what I call digital empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that anyone in the industry that has people that work for them has to look at the technology that they're applying to them and make sure it's making their lives better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How many of those things did you talk about that are paper processes, that are risk things, that have just pushed their way down and end up piling up
Mm-hmm.
on a trade contractor's desk, or the superintendent's desk, the person who needs to watch, who can see the women and men in the field and see when they might get distracted, and they don't have time to look at it because they're checking boxes, filling out forms. That's digital empathy. If we can use a tool to get rid of that, to keep their heads up, they'll know that Sally has got a problem at home. Husband just got laid off. Her mind might not be where it should be. So when she's on the tool, maybe it's take a little time before and talk, make sure everything's okay. Hear her out before she gets on the tools for the day. It might be, like you said, Miguel's son's getting bullied at home. I know that. I'm going to check in with him in the morning after our toolbox talk, make sure everything's cool. Maybe even give them a little time off if I can, but also make sure they're here. They're focused. It's now. We got you covered. But if they're buried in paperwork and junk, they're just not capable of doing that, because they got to get so much stuff done. Or they're doing that during the day, which a lot of our great supers are, but then they're doing the paperwork at night. And guess what? Nobody's watching them. So I love to see all of this come together. And I'm interested, sort of, where can SkillSignal and you and your mind, with the experience you have, where do you see more of this stuff being possible, and the future of how we can get better?
There is just so many processes, and I'm back into the processes because, again, that's the reality of what's happening on the job sites. There is so many processes that can be made more efficient, that we can help out, and that we can even enhance with technology today. We haven't even talked about generative AI, but we're starting to roll out. So, as you know, there is a lot of people in construction whom the first language they talk is not English, and so one of the things that generative AI does really well is translation.
Mm-hmm.
What we're starting to roll out in SkillSignal is simplifying the translation processes. People, if someone wants to do, has a whole crew of people that are speaking Spanish that morning, and they want to do the toolbox talk in Spanish, right? Because that's going to be much more efficient, but also much more effective, because people will understand it in their mother language. Then they should be able to do that. But then at the same time, you still need to report the paperwork in English. So there can be just a button that translates what just was said and presented to the guys in Spanish. You translate that back into English, it goes into the system, and you're done for the day. So that's just one example of how technology can help those processes be much more efficient and effective in the field as well. Looking at videos. Videos became extremely popular during COVID. You would never watch a video um, on a job site before COVID. Now, one of the things that's deeply embedded in SkillSignal is a video player. And so, if you want people to watch a refresher about working with a certain tool or doing certain things, then that video can be made available to them on their phone. They can watch it for a couple of minutes, and it's gonna just give that little help, little efficiency, that now they can go back to work and be that 1% or 10% safer, and that's making the whole difference.
And see, that's that all meeting them where they are, hitting them. And I love that, because I've heard this a couple of times. One of the biggest things out of generative AI is our language barriers are gone. We used to take forever to localize. Back in my day, years ago, localization to different languages of a software product was,
Yep.
it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's, there we go. We're done. I think about, I want to add another. I want to go to somewhere. I just pick up the language, and because of the way the large language models are, we can do these things now.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to see a focus on meeting them right where they are. We'd always talked about this with technology adoption, is like nobody sits through 8 hours of training and remembers any of it anymore. So yeah, maybe I sat through that training on that tool before I used it last time, but it's been 6 months since I used it, and now I'm on this job and I'm going to use it. And I'm like, am I going to wing it, or am I going to watch like the 2-minute refresher of like, hey, and by the way, when we do those, we can add in like, if this happens, be careful of this, like that. And we all know each one of those tools has a thing that you've got to be careful of.
Yeah.
And we can call it out right there, 2 minutes. And I mean, half of them watch a 2-minute video about, cats or, some other thing in the morning. So they're all comfortable with it, right? There's no barrier to those things anymore. We can meet them where they are. That's, to me, that digital empathy. That's boom, right where we want it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'll tell you another story, an interesting story that I heard from one of my clients lately. They've been with us for about a year. Recently, I talked to the owner of the company, and he said, we were expecting to grow, to have a record grow last year in the last 12 months. And this is an infrastructure contractor in the Northeast. And obviously, infrastructure, it's not going to be a problem of money, right? It's so the whole Build Back Better bill is pouring millions and billions into the infrastructure, and it's only starting now. So he was really expecting, as the owner, to make record growth for his company in the last 12 months. And he was sad because it didn't happen. And he said it was not because of the money. There's never been so much money than right now, but it's because we have not been able to find enough people. And and again, he's paying them really well. He's training them. And so we continued talking, and then we got back on the the whole well-being, and that's his next frontier, is because obviously he is competing with the other contractors in his area to get those few workers that are rare enough. And so how can he attract them rather than having to let them go to the competition? And so he decided that his next frontier was to be, looking at his employees in that lens of the total well-being. And not only safety, but well-being, giving them the digital tools, giving them the efficiency, giving them the, those refresher videos, giving them, because some of them, come out of trade school, and so they really need that up training all the time. But that was, to me, that was very interesting. It's not about the money in some of those trades. It's about there's just not enough people.
Yeah, I was sitting at a dinner the other night and talking to the bartender quick, and said something about my past career, and I said, "Oh, what was that?" Just I was asked that, thinking, a lot of bartenders go into like insurance and other places where they ask a lot of good questions because that's your job there. And he said, "Oh, I was a contractor."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wait a minute. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I started off, it's landscaping contractor." He's like, "Oh, I started off as a few of us. It was great. It was awesome. I started to grow. And then I was taking people, I was getting good jobs. And then I couldn't fill the crews. And then I couldn't fill the crews. And eventually he's like, I couldn't do it." And I'm like, and it goes back to, I didn't want to dig into it with him, but I was thinking, it's like, that's got to be the key, how you keep them.
Yeah, yeah.
Rob, I'm sure this brings up a lot of questions for you, my man.
It's been a fascinating conversation to think about this whole digitization and the mental side of things. We could probably talk for hours. One thing I was curious to ask you, Sebastien, was as you are digitizing workflows in this industry, I've kind of got an idea, but I'm curious for you, which of the workflows, and let's say between GC and trade, let's focus on the trades. When you're trying to digitize something, where have you found friction? Where has it been the hardest or not the easiest to convert? And I don't mean like, toolbox talk's a toolbox talk. I'm thinking probably more like an inspection or a PTP. Is there one trade that really was a challenge for your team, or was there one that was, you'd say, super easy to convert for one of your customers?
Yeah. I think looking at the ones that are, I think the most difficult ones are, I would call out concrete and electricians. These are, I found, the ones, and which is great because they're the ones that are really interested right now to digitize, because they find out that it's if you need to do it manually, it's going to be even more difficult and time consuming. So we see a lot of concrete companies that are really actively looking to digitize right now because they see how building, logic in their forms and in their checklists, and are you, what did you do this morning? Did you clean out all of your equipment? Does the chemicals that they're using? I mean, that's that's a whole story on itself. And then the electricians, the same thing, because they have all of these sub processes of the different voltages that they're using, the hot work, the types of wiring that they will be working with. So it's those ones, I would say, are the two trades that have the most complexity in their processes.
I can totally see that. Concrete with, I think, past the chemicals, the form work that they're putting together to do, is it a wall? Is it a footer? Elevated slabs. There's a lot of engineering that goes into creating these quote false forms, and you're putting a live load on it that's wet and chemical. Yeah.
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 And at the same time, I don't want to get the hate of the carpenters and the painters and everyone else. It's but I would, if I need to call out two that come immediately to mind. But look, every trade, it's only there is only more regulation. Just talking about painters as well, and I've heard that in Europe, regulation around painting and what type of paint you can use, and the rules and the materials are becoming much more complicated over there. So most likely, if it's not hit here yet, it's going to be here very soon. So I think every single trade is only looking at more and more complexity, and that's just the way things are. So again, it only makes more sense to try to make it more efficient, try to simplify it for the guys that need to do it. So yeah.
I appreciate it. You are speaking the truth of what I've been hearing for several years.
Yeah, it's great stuff, Sebastian. I'm really glad you reached out after I hit that Got Milk article last year, because this it took a little too long, but it's been great to have you on, man.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. This was an old dream of mine.
Well, you're not done, because you get to ride along with us in the construction technology news of the week. Back in 2020, I heard about a new software platform called Join. Within minutes of seeing Join, I knew it had the power to revolutionize collaborative project delivery. In fact, I was so sold on Join that I joined the team as its industry evangelist. Many trade shows and podcasts later, Join is now used by 50% of the ENR top 30. Why? Pre-con and ops leaders at DPR, Bolt, McCarthy, Barton Mallow, Clark, and others say that they like Join because it does two big things: collaborative, trackable decision-making, and awesomely simple visuals. Want to learn more about the power of Join? Go to www.join.build/demo to learn about how better gets built. Rob, what do you got for us this week? Now, wait, before you hit it, we got to put Sebastian, you're mowing your lawn. You're listening in. So here we go. Here's the news.
Well, safety is kind of a big focus of mine recently. So a couple of things I'm bringing to you just to throw out there, but they have a tech spin. So the first one, Virginia Tech Helmet Lab developing first construction hat safety rating system. I pulled this one off of a local website for Virginia Tech News. So why am I bringing this up? Well, the Virginia Tech Hard Hat Lab, they're expanding their capabilities past field athletics. So this amazing facility right now, they're testing, football helmets. And they're expanding to test helmets for us because, for those that don't know, in the construction industry, there's a big shift from the traditional hard hat to these new Type 2 helmets that look arguably more like a football helmet, a cycling helmet, a climbing helmet. They were popular in Europe several years before they came over here. If you're familiar with like a casque style, that's what we're talking about. But here's the issue. There's all these new helmets being made. Is it a Type 1? Is it a Type 2? It's really trying to understand the ratings, because I'm hearing so much pushback in the industry about, we already wear hard hats. Why are we going to wear these helmets? And when you're trying to look at them and honestly understand, like, well, why is one helmet $50 and another one's $200? It's just like any other piece of gear that you get. The more you spend, generally, the better it is. But why? So I think Virginia Tech's going to really be able to help out of doing this risk. And so it'll be something interesting to study. The show notes are there, but it's something I want people to think about is, if you've been now handed a Type 2 helmet, I could go on for hours, Jeff, about the nerdy reason, like, well, why do you wear this? Well, it's to protect you from a traumatic brain injury. How many of those really happen a year in the industry? Okay, a lot of safety pros are saying, well, there's not that many. Well, here's the kicker. When you have a traumatic brain injury and you're still alive and your brain doesn't work good, well, you want to talk about an expensive workers' comp claim. That's off the chart. So when companies are like, it's $100 helmet, I'm like, yeah. You ever had somebody with a TBI, a traumatic brain injury? So I'm not sure what you're thinking, but Virginia Tech does some amazing research. It's helping the construction industry now. It'll be interesting to see where this research lands to really help our contractors understand, like, how do you rate a helmet going forward? Because in your world, right, I'm sure you got a few helmets. When you're flying down a mountain in Colorado, you're probably pretty concerned about that melanin. If I hit a tree or ice, like, you kind of get it if you're on a mountain bike or if you're on your skis, of knowing what is the level of quality, this rating system in the world you're in. Now we're like, oh yeah, just put a helmet on in construction and you're good. How do you know?
There's always going to be more expensive, less expensive. There's always, but you need a rating system, right? The rating system allows people as data. It's like anything else. It's like sit around and make a data informed decision. Like, what type of work do we do? What are we trying to protect from? The interesting thing too is, like, we're in the summer months, right? So the one thing I haven't seen out of these helmets yet is that longer visor, that keeps you more shaded. I don't know if you, and let's be honest, Rob, we've been doing this long enough. Like, construction workers are very particular about their head protection, whatever you want to call it, their hard hat and, where the stickers go and et cetera. But it's also, we need these, just like Sebastien and his team did with Princeton, right? To go in and like, hey, what can we find? We need these independent groups to go in and help us quantify, qualify, and then provide information. I can see them saying like, hey, these helmets are great for this. These helmets are great for this. Traditional, this type of hard hat's better for here. Now I get to make this decision and buy what's right for my people. But the other thing I will say, just because I have heard that a number of times, oh, it's $100, it's $200. Yeah, well, listen, you're showing your culture if that's your problem. Because Sebastien, you said it. There's another contractor out there that would love to have those people to raise up their volume and capacity and treat them right and give them the right helmet. Mm-hmm. I don't want them going out and buying the $500 helmet just because it's $500. I want them to buy the helmet that meets the ratings that should protect their people. Mm-hmm. So that's my, and I'm interested, Sebastien, on your take on helmets. You've been around long enough to know the difference between hard hats and helmets, et cetera, but also have some experience in, third parties like the academia getting involved.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a sensational idea, and I think it's about time that we get ratings on those things because, as you said, right now again it's mostly a checkbox on a piece of paper. Am I looking at people on my job site that are all having something on their heads, right? But it doesn't really matter what it is. So as long as it looks like a hard hat or it looks like a helmet. So I think it's a sensational idea that we are moving into a rating system. I do believe, and I think I've seen that they are starting to do the same thing with gloves as well, hand protection. And I mean, look, everything starts with PPE. It's if you want to do, if you want to take the first step right, it's the PPE. Going back to my grandfather's story, that's exactly what he put in place was the PPE because that's where everything starts. So I think it's a sensational idea. I think I'm really glad to see that there are actually places like Virginia Tech, Princeton University. And I've seen some others certainly that are working with AGC, with ABC, those higher education, brilliant centers that are really stepping up and putting some resources in place to either do research or help develop certain things that are going to be very useful in construction. So I think it's I think I think we're only at the beginnings, but I think we'll probably see in the coming years that there is going to be much more collaboration with those universities and colleges to develop things that are going to be really amazing. You said the visors for the shade, lights. I've seen hard hats with like LED lights, which how cool is that too? Especially when you're working at night on highways and things like that. You want to be protected. You want to be seen. So, oh yeah, no, this is great.
It's an interesting time and concept. Well, now let's get a little nerdy when we're talking about our safety, right? So we brought up AI a little bit. And from where I've been sitting and watching, well, how is AI going to help safety? This is an interesting article found on AzoBuild. And so there's a recent article published in Sustainability, and it's talking about a single shot deep neural network, a DNN. And that model is capable of simultaneously performing proximity and relationship detections. And what is this geared at? It's aimed to address the risk of unwanted forcible contacts associated with construction robots. So, Jeff, this is something we've really been pontificating a while now about, well, how are we going to bring robots into the industry? And people freak out about being replaced by them. Well, let's pause for a moment on the safety and say, how are we going to prevent incidental contact, right? Because the robots are going, you program the robot to do the task, it's going to do the task. It's not going to be aware that there's a human in the way or the human didn't understand. You know what I'm saying? Like there's not a sentient part controlling this. It's, you're programming the machine to do a task. It will execute on the task. So how does it get vision around it? Kind of like the closest thing that I can think right now is where we're at with cars. The Volkswagen that I drive, it is not self-driving, but it has just right up to that line of it knows when I cross paint lines when I shouldn't be if I'm drifting. It knows when the car in front of me is braking too hard. So my machine that's been programmed by somebody else on the road is watching out for me, the human. Now, granted, when it rains, none of that works, right? It's offline. But on a construction site now, as we're seeing a few of these robots come into play, like how are they going to bake this AI in that it's going to look at it? Because as you read the article, it goes into these three models that keep getting deeper and deeper, right? From there's a basic model to detect just relationships with these, they're saying object bounding boxes and classes. And then it's getting into relationship detection. So we're talking about AI baked into a robot, basically trying to make sure it doesn't hit humans as it's trying to do its task. This is definitely something that's got me thinking, at least from the safety side of things, right? Of how's this going to work? But I'm curious, you looked at the AI a lot more deeply than I have, but we're not talking about an AI helping an app. We're talking about an AI helping a robot make sure a human doesn't have incidental contact.
We talked about this a long time ago, that we could foresee a moment when the technology could catch up to the IoT and the detection devices so that basically these job sites can orchestrate in an efficient manner. Like, preventing the collisions is important. So if you have your backup camera and your backup warning and you're backing up your car and somebody else is backing up their car, you can still hit each other, right? Because you don't know what they don't know. They don't know what you don't know. So this is these networks being able to talk to one another and not only prevent, but predict and in the eventual coordinate how we're doing the work and where we're doing the work. We've seen a lot of autonomy and grading and other large, heavy equipment that's been going on for a really long time. We just haven't taken it to its full extent because there's been some limits in our capabilities of creating these networks and really, meshing them together in a way that's going to work really, really well. So I see this as just one more way that we can enhance and build on the experience of certain autonomous things we can do. Again, everybody gets afraid that we're going to get rid of people in construction. It is not going to happen. I'll go back to Sebastien again. His customers not making as much revenue as he'd like because he needs more people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he can do better and get more people, but not as many as he probably can get work. So we need to augment those people, but we need those devices to be as enabled as possible to create safety and efficiency. So I see this as a cool opportunity. And, with all the things going on, Sebastien, you've probably seen things like this. This is what we need to take the next step.
100%. And I think people in construction have some very bright days in front of them. They won't be replaced, but there is certainly certain jobs that would greatly benefit from getting some robotic help or some Rob, you described when you're driving and your car lets you know that you're over the line or someone's braking in front of you. How cool is that, right? How it's keeping you safe. And so I think there is definitely certain roles on those job sites that would greatly benefit from getting that extra help, getting that automated help, and because it's going to keep everyone safe. I'm thinking, crane picks, for example, which are, I think that could be something that would be one of the processes that could get a lot of help from AI and from analyzing certain images and cameras being placed on those cranes that can be, again, those images can be analyzed, making sure that you're not hitting anyone or anything while you're doing that crane pick. But then also what comes to mind is I watched this cool video not so long ago. I want to say it's a few months ago. It was a network. This is Volvo, the truck division of Volvo. And so they were filming this video of Volvo trucks driving completely autonomously, right? So robots, right, essentially. And they were all those trucks, I believe, they were not only working by themselves, but they were also connected to each other. And then the coolest factor was they had a couple of drones that were flying overhead and sending information back to the trucks about the environment. So that to me is pretty robotical, and it's definitely creating that network that's making sure that, again, those trucks will be able to function without hitting anything or anyone, which is even more important.
It's a brave new world with all this technology coming at us. So that's two things I had for the week, Jeff.
Well, I love it. I'm going to move, and we're going to stay on the AI train today. Don't worry, we're getting back to robotics, though. I'm coming back to robotics at the end here. Just a little stay tuned. But I wanted to call out, our friends at Document Crunch won a huge award. They won the 2024 AI Breakthrough Award, which some of you may know in 2023 was won by a company called OpenAI. If you don't know OpenAI, well, I don't know what rock you've been under and how you've been listening to the show, but it's ChatGPT, the founders and inventors of that. Why is this important for construction, though? I think it's really important because Josh Levy, the CEO, has been focused on, there's all of this noise out there about AI. And trust me, a lot of it is noise. If you look at the funding features right now, people are slapping an AI lipstick on a pig all over the place. To try and get more funding, to try and get more attention. And this is really talking about using AI to focus on construction workflows that are very industry specific. If you guys don't know, Document Crunch focuses on contracts and basically operationalizing your contract. First it started with review, but now it's how does it work in your day-to-day and how do you get those things done? And look, there's lots of trends out there right now, and there's going to be lots of great places to use AI, but too many people are focusing on the general availability, the general capability, or just, just slapping it on when it's really not what it is. And these guys are really focused on innovating in a specific sector that, let's be honest, the risk in construction is where the money's at, but it's also where the trouble's at. And that always goes back to your contractual relationship. Are you signing up for something that you shouldn't be signing up for? Then once you sign up for that, how do you operationalize that? How do you take what used to take a lawyer or somebody to do and shorten it so that an operations person can use that in the field to help their people make decisions much faster? And how can we start to intermingle those as well? So I wanted to say congratulations to the team out there and, really say, look, it's time. The time is now, but also be skeptical. Put on your skeptic's hard hat and really, hit those new technologies when they start coming at you with show me, don't tell me, Rob. And we were talking about this before the show. Your 8 steps, which by the way, I boiled down to 5, the highest form of his was digitizing safety. Mine was digitizing your company. That blocking and tackling is still true. You can't be focused on the shiny objects just because they say they're shiny. You have to focus on your problems. You have to focus on, is it industry specific? Is it solving for and doing what you need? And can you show me? Don't tell me. So, Rob, I'm interested. You've watched the Crunch for a while. What's your thoughts?
Amazing vision. Talked with Josh so many times, and congrats to them for the award. They're definitely really trying to improve our industry. Hearing his original statements of he was tired of being, the Siri of his company and having this vision, it's great to see what they're really putting out there with, at the same time, them very much understanding the use and the application of the AI to the workflow and the product that they're doing. It's great to see success. It's great to see that they're moving ahead. And to your point, they're really trying for the betterment of the industry, how to improve that workflow, right? When you're talking about reading through these contract documents, the language alone in construction documents is maddening. And I mean, we're thinking about some of these things can be 2 to 3 inches thick when you print them out. And how are you possibly going to find every little loophole. What human is really that good of reading contract after contract and looking for, let's be honest, in the old days, how are they trying to figure out which way they're going to get screwed on this contract again and again and again, and really reading it? It's great to see what they're doing for the betterment of the industry. So hats off to them. Awesome work. Please keep it up. And again, for the betterment of the industry, it's great. But tempering that AI, that's interesting to watch how they're going to do that.
Yeah, Sebastien, I'm interested as somebody who builds for the industry, what your focus and what your thoughts are on it.
Congratulations for the award. It always feels, like an amazing milestone when you get the recognition, I think, from the industry and beyond. And I think, again, the AI is going to take everyone over. It's going to have an influence and an impact on every single industry, including the construction industry. And I think Josh found the one where that impact starts, which is the documents and the contracts, and God knows how important those contracts and those agreements are, because they're the ones that once if something happens, that's what you'll bring to court, unfortunately, when you'll need to go there. So I think this is only the beginning, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to evolve.
Yeah, my favorite quote, I heard it from Tanis Laviniak. I'm not sure where she got it from, but AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty classic. It's also great to see that, there's this focus in our world, and, not as a teaser to come, but as a teaser to come, there's more areas around this that we can get better. And I think you'll hear about some of them soon. Just a little teaser to keep tuning in. Now we're going to go on, because there was this kind of walk away from robotics for a little while. And I came across this Stardust Insights about, thanks to the ConTech for Tacos CMEX group, as usual, for bringing me something I wanted to read, 10 new emerging construction robotics. So Raise Robotics, a facade installation. I thought this one was really, really interesting to see some of the things they're capable of doing. But also, they're also able to do, when you're putting up you've laid the, you've poured the concrete, Rob, and you've got to put up barriers around, right? One of the most unsafe things to do is go put those fasteners down to create the temporary fencing, right? That's to keep people from falling on an open building. But somebody has to put themselves in that position. And so these robots are actually going out there to do that for you. And that's what Raise Robotics has built, is an automated actuating arm that a person can operate to keep our workers at a safe position and do the work for you. This is the key, right? That's a repetitive task. It takes a person and a model and watching over, and they're watching over it. But now maybe they can do twice or three times as many in a day, and they're never in a position where something bad can happen to them personally. But my whole point behind bringing this was there's still a lot. We're seeing a ton. We all saw Canvas. Canvas is not the only one. My Robot's out there. Finishing Robotics is out there. We got some robotic welding with stud automation. Like, there's so many of these things coming out. Now, look, I'm going to be a little, trust tree here. A lot of people are calling things robots that aren't really robots. They're just another tool. Like, if we went back to the day when I was working at Gallegos, we got this thing called a spider crane, right? The cool thing about it was it can fit through a regular doorway, but it can lift amazing amounts of things in the right area. But the hardest thing is you can't get a crane in there. But a spider lift, you can get into these places, and then it can do things that you couldn't do. Well, there's a lot of that out there. There's one of these out there that I thought was cool. Quimo, Quimo, has a number of different things they're calling construction robots. They're basically just new tools that are smaller, more nimble, with a few features added on to them so you can switch things out, so you can work in confined spaces, in smaller spaces, but not be lifting, not be trying to look. How many times, Rob, as a safety person, have you walked in somewhere and somebody's, lifting something and you're like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What are you trying to do here? Because what in the end do we got to do, man? We got to get it done. And what do these folks in our field do? They get it done. They always have, always will. That doesn't mean it's always done with the most of care for their bodies and their physical well-being. So I thought it'd be interesting, Rob. Anything stand out to you on the construction robotics front?
That is definitely interesting. The one that you hit on, talking about putting what you're referring to, they're called slab grabbers. Some human has to get on the leading edge of a building to install this piece that's going to hold usually the 2x4s or sometimes guardrails. That's a big safety pain point, or around elevator shafts. It'd be crazy amazing to think if they could modify that at some point. How could it ever get up on a roof? Installing roofing is definitely such a hazardous thing where those employees are always subject to gravity. So that's definitely an interesting one. You talked about the finishing on the outside of buildings. Same thing. You're out on the outside of a building trying to apply stucco or veneer, even applying wrapping. They're either on a swing stage or, depending on the type of product. I still see, for those of you who want to nerd out for a moment, we're talking about a ladder jack scaffold. That's basically one little platform attached to two long extension ladders, and they're tied off to nothing. That is so hazardous, right? So where could you put a robot to climb up? If I'm thinking back several years, we were looking at the robot that did bricks. There's a way to change it. It's just going to get into the engineering, the price point, and also then the safety too, of like, well, how high up can you put a robot? Where can you put a robot? Or like I was just talking about, where do you put a robot so it doesn't interfere with a human? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of high risk tasks.
I mean, you look at the mule. That's one of the things they've done over the years is they've made that reach longer, that it can now be placed on certain types of scaffolding. So, and it's got a longer throw. So there's these things. And also what each one of these does, each one of these innovations might not be the winner, but it shows people. It's why it's funny. I always make jokes about Atlas when I'm on stage because, the human being is a really poor thing to try to make into a robot because we're just not really built well, for what we need things to do. But if you look at some of the actuation and things that they've done on Atlas itself, you can see people taking inspiration from that and building smaller, more nimble, more usable tools. I mean, I think the tools of the future are these. They're not really completely robots. They're tools. They're just a new tool. So, Sebastien, I'm interested because, robots, safety, it's key, man.
Yeah, it is key. I mean, look, I love science fiction, always have, movies and books. So this is the stuff of science fiction movies, and the good thing about science fiction is that mostly it's happening, right? When you look at the science fiction movies from the 50s, we live in that world right now, and so I'm pretty sure that looking at the science fiction movies from today, we're going to be living in that world in a few years from now. It's only accelerating. So, but to your point, I think the relationship between robots and safety, and keeping people safe, or replace some of those very dangerous processes that they would need to do, that's a no-brainer. So that's I think it's more going to be a question of how quickly can they build them, how quickly can they make them available to people, in terms of pricing. There is Spot the robot from Boston Dynamics, and I think people love seeing that thing at shows and expos, and I have seen them a couple of times. I think the one thing that's keeping it away right now is just the price tag, but that price tag will come down at some point. That's always happening with technology. So
yeah, that's the beauty of it too. Seeing so many of them come out, it will drive them to look for manufacturing ways to make those things more affordable. And in the end, as they compete with one another, they're driving the price down to something that's tenable for the industry. And then now we can use it. And it's really never about replacing. It's always about augmenting. It's always about growing the capabilities and reducing the wear and tear. So. Listen, guys, we could go on forever, I'm sure, but it is that time. We got to wrap it up. Rob McKinney, it is so great to have you back on the microphone, my friend.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Safety is something I care about. Always love to meet people like Sebastien, and let's nerd out about how to keep our brothers and sisters in the industry in a better spot.
You got it. Sebastien, so great to have you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for all the activity you do out there. By the way, if you folks are not following him, you need to follow him online. He's always dropping really good nuggets.
And thank you so much for the invite today. You've been one of my major sources of following the industry, understanding what's happening in the industry, and what people are doing to make it better. So thank you so much for doing what you do. And if people are interested, I would like to mention two places where they can find out more about what we do. The first one is SkillSignal. So that's going to be skillsignal.com. So that's very easy. And they'll find out what the product is about and how we, if you want to convert your paper and manual processes to some cool mobile applications, that's where you need to take a look. And then if you're interested to know more about how, ideas and interventions that you can do on your job sites to promote worker well-being, mental health, safety, go and check out the website that we've built with Princeton, which is wellbeing.construction. So no .coms, no .org, just wellbeing.construction.
And you guys know we'll have those in the show notes for you. So if you haven't looked there, you need to look there. And if you aren't subscribing, you need to subscribe because, you'll get that in your inbox too. Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Sebastien de Ghellinck. To read all our news stories, to learn more about our guests, and to listen to the show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.